further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Joe Lonick, Senior Director with Ipsos's Social Intelligence team. Joe, you have the floor.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe, Senior Director on the Social Intelligence team here at Ipsos, and what I'll be doing today is providing you various consumer perspectives on both the recession and spending coming into 2023 as expressed through social media conversations, online conversations in forums like Reddit, as well as through search data. And I'm joined by my colleague here, Caitlin Sorrell.
Yeah, I'm Caitlin Sorrell. I am a Vice President with the Online Communities team. I joined Ipsos back in 2015 and have been on the Communities team since then. So today I will be sharing some findings from our online US syndicated community called Fresh Lab, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But yeah, just to complement what we were hearing on social, we also reached out to our syndicated members just to provide more depth there.
Awesome, and just a brief overview of our agenda for today. We'll start out by just setting the scene, a macroeconomic scene towards the end of 2022, before we then dive into what consumers are saying and doing across social media, search, and online forums. Then we'll turn it over to Caitlin, who will go through the Fresh Lab findings and really uncover and help us learn a lot about this emerging conscious shopper and consumer. Then we'll take a look at some of the categories that are looking to do well this year and other areas that might be challenged before we leave you with some pointers on how to deliver value in 2023. So diving right into setting the scene here, at the end of last year, what we actually saw was across the globe, consumer confidence really dipping to levels not seen since 2020. So full-on pandemic, full-on supply chain challenges, we see consumers and consumer confidence really dropping as we approach the end of the year. That's across the globe, but in particular across the two largest economies on earth, with the largest consumer spend, China and the United States. So consumers, again, across the globe, really showing weakness, really showing low confidence as we started the year, as we started 2023. And then as we zoom in on the United States specifically, what we see here in this blue line is the personal savings rate, which you can see in 2022 Q3 hit an all-time low of 3%. At the same time, personal expenditures continue to rise. And this isn't necessarily because consumers are buying more, but it's more because of the impact of inflation. So consumers are spending more, saving less, and in much more of a precarious situation as we start the year 2023. And so in order to dive into how consumers are feeling, what their perspectives are, and what they're planning to do throughout 2023, we have through our Synthesio, Ipsos own dashboard and social intelligence platform, we have a dashboard dedicated specifically to tracking topics, themes, and trends around the economy, the recession, and inflation that's ongoing to keep track of everything. What we did there was we took a selection of conversations from January of this year, 20,000 conversations, a representative sample of all conversations on social media and on forums to really understand what challenges consumers are facing, how they're thinking about the recession, and what they're planning to do in response to either a downturn or an actual recession. And then I'll turn it over to Caitlin to talk a bit about the Fresh Lab community that we launched for this work as well.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we leveraged our US syndicated community for this, which has over 3,500 members. They ideate and collaborate on a wide range of topics. On the community, we utilize, a variety of different qualitative and quantitative tools. For this particular research, we leveraged a couple of discussion forums as well as quick surveys. These are available for custom projects as well, so we can do kind of quick turn pulse checks as well as ongoing longitudinal studies on our communities. And our platform is also mobile friendly and supports 24/7 participation to really allow ongoing conversations and collaboration to occur.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation around what consumers are saying and doing as expressed through social media, through unprompted social media conversations and search. So starting with the search trends here, what we're looking at is topics related to the economy, recession, inflation, and what consumers were searching for, looking to find out more information. And so we actually see that search around the recession and the economy as well as inflation peaked in the first half of 2022, particularly with Russia's invasion of Ukraine hitting food prices, energy prices, and then China's continued strict lockdowns, dampening demand across the globe. Consumers were searching early on last year about what a recession is. Technically, what are the requirements? How can you have a recession with inflation and low employment, just reflecting the unprecedented nature of the current situation, the current macroeconomic situation that consumers are in. That's completely new, especially for the youngest generations in our workforce today, including Gen Z and millennials. But what you actually see is search around those topics tailed off towards the end of the year. And that's really as consumers began to really price in a recession and began to believe that a recession was already apparent, or that we were already in the midst of a recession, as expressed through this Reddit user here who talks about, we're almost already in a recession, and a lot of conversations to that effect in the last half of last year. Sorry, it just went out of presentation mode. And then what we also saw was that 50% of our community already believes that we're in a recession. And so from there, what we're looking at here is search data. Sorry, there's an issue with, sorry about that. And so now what we're going, Megan, there's some kind of issue with the,
Hi, Joseph. Is it not moving forward?
Yeah, can you still see it?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, so again, about 50% of the community that Caitlin will focus on also stated that they believe that we're already in a recession. So what this indicates that regardless of whether or not we're in a technical recession or not, consumers are feeling the pain, they're feeling the challenges, they're feeling the anxiety. And so again, whether or not we enter a recession or not, we are in a weakened state for the economy, and consumers are across the board doing what they can to mitigate the fallout of that. And so let's dive into the actual conversation. So what you see here is from our topic modeling analytics here, which is completely driven by artificial intelligence. We took a selection of about 20,000 representative conversations, again, related to the topics of the recession, of inflation, and the economy overall, to see what was coming out and what was top of mind for consumers. And as we go through this, we'll be focusing on a few different audiences. This first audience we'll be thinking about are those who are in the most precarious state. So those who really who have found that their savings are entirely depleted or that they've never had any. This is quite a consistent theme throughout, that the savings that were accumulated throughout the pandemic have really been drawn down in 2022. And as a result, many of these consumers are instead looking to establish a small emergency fund. That could be in the event that your car breaks down, that could be in the event of a health issue, but it could also be in the event of layoffs or layoffs in your particular sector. So establishing an emergency fund to kind of get through the worst of things. So we see these consumers in the most precarious and most difficult situations, trying to find ways to mitigate the impact of the recession, and they're really planning for the worst here. And you see that as they're seeking guidance. So some of them are seeing the headline news about layoffs in tech, and they're thinking, how do I plan for that? If layoffs come to my sector or to my company, how do I even go about filing for unemployment? But they're also looking for simpler things, like how to better start saving money, how to improve their financial understanding so that they can even do simple things like budgeting. And so what you see here is this individual is doing something very simple, or they're directly depositing their paycheck into a different bank account so that they can't touch it and they can't access it. So people are really looking for ways to kind of rebuild their savings, rebuild a fund, as they're very concerned about their ability to weather a recession or even a mild downturn. And now as we step up to people who are in a little bit of a better situation, maybe they're not cutting off essentials, they're still finding that their spending is constrained. And so it'll come as no surprise that in the conversation, high egg prices, meat prices, they came up quite consistently, inflation across the grocery. And while that isn't new, what is new about the consumer today is after 3 years of crises, a pandemic, supply chain challenges, rampant inflation, is consumers today have a lot more agency. And so when they see those meat prices, they step into the aisle and they say, well, we're not having meat this week, or maybe we'll have frozen meat for dinner instead. And so the agility of these consumers, they're really well trained to trade down, to come up with different solutions. And so we're really seeing the agency and a really well-primed consumer population being able to pivot when prices rise in certain areas and come up with a viable alternative. And really they're doing that as they step into the grocery store. Areas where they have a less agency are around energy and rent, but what we see here with this individual is, turning your heat off at night to save a bit of money as energy bills are through the roof. Consumers are finding that they can go without in many instances, and for those individuals who are healthier and can go without the heat at night, they're thinking, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I don't need to be spending this much on energy. And their behaviors and their spending is going to change as a result. And so we start to see consumers employing a bit more agency and a bit more resiliency when it comes to energy. Now, for these individuals in particular, renting is really the only option. The rent is extremely high for consumers and remains a challenge. But what's emerging out of these conversations around rent is a challenge to this idea of, marrying and buying a home. It's really what's emerging here, and that we do need to keep tabs on is the changing structure of households. We see friends coming together thinking about buying a home. We see parents asking children to move back in with them to cover mortgage, to cover payments, for everyday essentials. We see extended families moving in together. And so as these alternative housing structures or home structures start to get set up and gain traction, it's really important to think about, what does that mean for shopping for that household? Who's doing it? How are common spaces being used? So we're seeing a beginning of a conversation around alternative housing setups that are going to really change how consumers shop and shop for their households. And moving up from here is consumers who are even a little bit better off here. So despite challenges, they are able to make ends meet at the end of the month, and they even might have a little bit excess left over. And for these individuals, what they're prioritizing, and they actually frame it more as an essential, are things like treats for themselves. So buying a game or self-care. There's also elements of self-improvement and then prioritizing experiences. So on that small treat piece here, we see people, keeping a fund so that they can buy, pay for a concert, buy a game. We see gaming as an area where people, find joy, find community, and it's something that they're not looking to give up. And it's both a treat, but also an essential for them. And then we see many conversations to this effect, this individual coming on, looking to not only spend less, but also, cook from home, make delicious meals, learn how to cook, be healthier. And they're using this as an opportunity, the challenges in dining out with the prices there, as an opportunity to improve themselves, learn a new skill. And it kind of harkens back to the beginning of the pandemic, where we saw people looking at, new skills that they could potentially develop in response to macro forces that are far out of their control. In that area, we also see people taking courses. If they're thinking about layoffs in their sector, they're thinking about how they can train or upskill themselves to make them more indispensable or pivot to a new career. And then we also see people like this who are not planning to spend right now, but they're prioritizing an experience fund. So it might be the Beyonce concert later in the year. It could be a nice trip. It could be a really nice restaurant that they want to go to with some friends. So we do see consumers keeping in this this status where they're a little bit better off. They're really prioritizing these small funds that are helping them stay sane and still find joy in the everyday life and have things to really look forward to. Then a step up from those consumers are those consumers who are in a much better place. So they're actually looking at the recession, particularly downturn in stocks, as a major opportunity. Some of them are looking at housing prices and thinking about how they might actually be able to go after buying a home with the housing prices coming down. But then we also see a lot of this idea of buying the dip. So from prior downturns, we see kind of this FOMO where people are talking about they missed out last time and they're not going to miss it this time. This individual is talking about, I feel like right now's the right time to get into stocks. But there's also discussion in there around crypto. Crypto remains a desirable asset for a lot of consumers, despite the exchange challenges. But they're also looking at crypto as kind of a gamble, a way to make a quick gain, really quick gain and fast. And then consumers are also looking at, within the auto sector, electric vehicles. So even though this consumer profile is a little bit better off, they don't want to be spending all this money on gas or on energy bills. And so they're looking at electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles because they're longer life of the vehicle itself, and then the savings that can be accumulated through that. And then there's also some looking at the used auto market, which, if you remember, again, during the pandemic, there was really low supply of used automobiles, but the supply has come back online, and there are some good deals that lots of consumers are looking for. And now, regardless of what status consumers are in, whether that's most precarious situation through to those who are maybe looking to kind of profit from a downturn, everyone is reviewing their spending and investigating ways to save more money. And they're asking themselves, do I need brand name items? Are they delivering me the value? Can I get the same thing elsewhere? This individual talking about trash bag's a trash bag, or half-price oatmeal, I can enhance it with a couple things that I have in my cupboard and it's just as good. So really people questioning the value of brands and whether or not they really should make the spending cut each month. And they're also asking themselves across the board where they're spending. They're kind of reviewing their balance sheets and what their spend is by month and asking themselves, is this worth it? And so we have things like internet plans coming up where consumers are actually going to their internet provider and demanding a discount or asking them what they can do to reduce the cost there. They're also looking at different banks and asking other consumers, who can give me rewards or points for everyday spend? Who can give me a high yield savings account? So exploring all kind of categories within their lives. And then some are also finding, maybe I don't need to spend money right now and I can take my savings and just pay down my credit card debt, which we saw as a major cluster here. And people seeing that as a really wise decision at the beginning of this year. Eliminate your debt, especially credit card debt with interest rates rising, to put yourself in a much better place financially. But overall, consumers are asking themselves these key questions that we need to be cognizant of are brands delivering value, and are the products and services that we're offering to consumers, are they going to be worth it, and are they going to make the cut at the end of the month? And so now I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to take us through the findings from the Flash community.
Yeah, so, when we're looking back at some of the cost-saving habits that members noted taking in the summertime, we shared some of these in the inflation webinar we did at that time. We see a lot of these continuing at the same rate towards the end of last year. However, there are gaps surrounding travel, particularly how often they're traveling, and then also taking non-essential trips outside the home to save on gas. What we can learn from this is that a handful of these cost-saving habits they developed due to the pandemic and inflation are now starting to show signs of becoming status quo or part of their routines. In terms of how long it takes to officially form a habit, there's no set scientific answer per se. It depends a lot on how often it's done, how often the habit is done consistently, among other variables. However, there are some studies that suggest on average it takes more than 2 months before a new behavior becomes automatic. So, something to consider as, the climate has evolved and just built on top of the pandemic, on top of inflation, now heading into where, half of our members believe we're already in a recession. A lot of these habits are becoming part of their everyday lives. Most particularly, one of the more popular habits that was adopted and is, continuing to be a strong focus is this idea of purchasing less non-essential items. So, when double clicking into this within our discussion boards that we launched, we found a really strong theme of members describing the way they currently shop as evaluating purchases on a need versus want basis. Joe talked a lot about this, seeing this in social, so we're going to dive into this really deep over the next couple sections to understand, what that means, what the impact is. So if you go to the next slide. And then, so this quote from a member, I felt like really just summed it up kind of in a nice tied bow in terms of how we got here. So she says, I find that I'm a more cautious shopper now. I'm shopping when I need to, not because I want to, and asking myself, do you really need this? I've always loved to shop for clothes and shoes, but I have so many items that I've only worn once or twice, and some not at all, due to working remotely and social distancing during the pandemic, that now when I see sales and items I want, I'm not being so impulsive. So you can kind of see the evolution of where this, need versus want mentality has really started to come to the forefront. So aside from, the obvious cost-saving benefit, right, of approaching shopping this way, there definitely are other key benefits that are kind of rising to the top. Most commonly, this idea of being in control. So, by evaluating things on a need versus want basis, they feel like they're shopping smarter or, outsmarting brands and stores in order to get the best deal. So it's almost like gamified or fun in a way for them. There's this realization that it's less wasteful. So, the appreciating what you have or repurposing something that you already own feels good and it feels responsible to do that. And then lastly, this idea of self-improvement or, personal accomplishment. So they feel like a better person when they act this way, that they're better for their family or their household when they shop this way. This one member says, here's where I'm most proud. She's just calls it out there, right? She's super proud that she lives this way, that she lives within her means. This kind of habit makes it easier for her to save a little bit each month so she can afford to buy like tiny luxuries, right? Like organic milk or wine is something she considers as little, expensive treats. And she goes as far to say that I have a sign in my home that says, I've done so much with so little for so long that now I can do anything with nothing. Well, it's true. So yeah, just some key benefits that we're seeing, in addition to those financial savings. So then to better understand what this approach looks like in action, we've collected a couple examples from our members. So firstly, there's, planned shopping trips only. So eliminating any unnecessary or impulse trips to the store. So not just stopping into Target because it sounds good for the moment, but making sure it's really part of your routine and you're intentional about going there for something you need. One member actually said, logically fewer trips means less money spent, guaranteed. Another obvious one is coupons and discounts. So, but the way that they're doing this is they're actively seeking out these deals when they're making their lists or deciding where to shop, right? So being really proactive and intentional about that. Also, while they're browsing online or at the store, they're buying, the sale item versus their preferred brand, or, stocking up when something that they frequently repurchase or prefer is on sale. Weekly meal planning. So generally this behavior kind of allows for them to have a lower overall spend. And they can also customize their menu based on current prices, right? So if eggs are really expensive, then they're not using those that week. Or if meat is really expensive, they're doing something else. So this weekly meal planning allows for that overall lower spend and very intentional ingredient spends. Putting large purchases and upgrades on hold. So, making a proactive list of the different things that they are looking to buy for this year that are a little bit higher ticket. They're watching those prices, saving, planning for them, or just pausing upgrades altogether. So a couple examples of this was one member said a beauty product that has been upgraded. Oh no.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Is that okay? That's good. Sorry about that.
You're good. No, you're good. So yeah, so one example of this was, a beauty product that one member had purchased had been upgraded recently. She saw the ad for it, but she didn't buy it because she already had the previous version. It didn't feel necessary. Something that might have felt like a treat or, an indulgence before, she passed on it. Another member was describing his process of potentially buying a new car. So he test drove a new car, but then realized there was, quote, nothing wrong with his current one. So it made sense to just wait until the price was better and the purchase just made more sense overall. Lastly, I think this is one of the more interesting habits that we saw emerge in the community was this idea of cart reprioritization. So, both online and in store, the idea of putting the things that you want into your cart and then swapping items or deleting them before checkout in order to save money. So one member says, I frequently go online and shop, filling a cart, then I start removing all the nice to have items and start swapping necessities with smaller quantities or cheaper brands. So starting with the wish list and then paring down from there is definitely something people are doing both in store and online. So then now we're going to dive into kind of some category specifics and then focusing in on areas that you can really focus temptations on, right? So how do you turn something that's a want into a need? So it's important to note that the level of impact of this approach is so likely to vary by category. So for example, trading down is more likely to occur for dry and canned goods and paper and cleaning products, while nearly half say that they would still purchase their preferred brand of pet food if the cost rose, right? So they're not willing to really sacrifice on that brand or that purchase for their pets, but then there's definitely other areas where they're a little bit more lenient. And then additionally, there are other categories which are going to see more of a split. So things like alcoholic beverages. So 35% are likely to remain brand loyal in the case of a cost increase, while others would either trade down or purchase a smaller quantity of that preferred brand. So definitely not a one size fits all approach or impact when we look at the different categories. So how do you turn a product or a service from a want to a need, right? Some of that is set. You're never going to be, if you're not toilet paper, you're not something else, you're always going to kind of need to shift in different ways. So when we looked at what consumers are likely to prioritize when shopping, we see like a strong focus on quality, longevity, and health. So you can kind of see here that somebody says, I'm trying to buy the things I need and less of those things that I want. However, if a product would make me feel better emotionally and mentally, then I'd buy it, like a therapy light for the winter. Another person was talking about their process of ordering some sheets online and that, after reading reviews and really thinking it over, she decided to spend a little bit more to be comfortable and, knows that it will make her feel nice and that in the end of the day, it will also last longer. So yeah, I think, these are common attributes that people like to promote and things that we know that consumers care about, but understanding the priority and the order of those is going to be really key. And generally, these attributes tie really well into what we heard generally when asking members about their plans for this year. So Joe talked about, their intentions of paying down debt and creating a safety fund. We saw kind of consistent themes of that in terms of focusing on long-term goals versus short, and then, a desire of focusing on experiences over things. This also ties really well into what we heard in terms of travel, right? So people thinking definitely more long-term, forward thinking rather than impulse and in the moment when they're considering these. So then, as Joe mentioned at the end, so we're going to kind of wrap up to understand how you can deliver value in this, state in this new year. Good news is you can take advantage of this time of uncertainty and create opportunities for your brand or your service. So specifically by focusing on quality and longevity in terms of materials, ingredients, how long it's going to last them or that long-term benefit. Also promoting health and wellness or creating a partnership maybe that would benefit their health or their mental state. So, and then Joe's going to cover up the last two and then wrap up with some helpful questions you can reflect on and take away today.
Yeah, and so the third piece here is really about helping consumers and support them along with their long-term goals. So whether that's personal development, whether it's the experience that they want to achieve, or their travel goals, how can you go and message to them about how you're helping to support that and you're part of that process for them? And then the final piece here is around thinking about loyalty rewards. We heard across the community and across social, just the really powerful value that consumers are getting when they can use different perks, points, loyalty rewards to pay for everyday expenses. And so thinking about how we can translate those, to consumers and really offer them the perks so that they can see even greater value from working with you in particular. And so, as Megan mentioned, we wanted to leave you with a few different kind of questions and kind of this brand evaluation toolkit, some things just to think about moving forward. And the first one is, are consumers really seeing your product or service as a need or a want? We want to get them into a place where they do need this, which will involve, delivering that value to them and justify and helping them justify their spend and their outlays with you, with your brand, with your product, with your service. You'll also want to start thinking about what makes your brand and service or product different, from the competition, but also to the consumer. What unique benefit or value can you offer for your consumer? And then third is what we've noted throughout today is really about behavior change. We've had 3 years of really challenging economic time, and that's more than enough time for new behaviors and new needs to set in. And so in this kind of new world, how are you living into those or delivering against those new needs, those new priorities, and the new benefits that consumers are looking for? And how does your long-term brand positioning fit into that? So we just wanted to leave you with a few of those kind of questions that you can ask yourself as you start planning for the year ahead and much further out. And with that, we're just going to take a few questions before we close for today.
So yeah, it looks like, okay, so Joe, this one's for you. Are there any specific brands showing up in a positive way?
Oh yeah, there was a good amount of negativity kind of across social, just given kind of the macroeconomic context, but there are definitely bright spots for a number of brands. Talked about the inflation at grocery. Consistently, we've seen really positive conversations around retailers like Costco, just helping them achieve, not have to cut so much while still tracking towards some of their saving or experience goals that they want to set. So really a lot of praise there. And really people talking about enjoying the shopping experience, enjoying the value, and really pleased with their overall experience and choice to go with Costco. We also saw a lot of different banks coming up, so those offering high yield savings accounts. We saw Amex coming up quite a bit because people really kind of leveraging kind of the points that they've accrued through their everyday spending that they're doing to pay off other expenses or pay for other things or pay for other experiences. So Costco, Amex, kind of some of these banks are really getting a lot of credit for helping consumers out a lot. And then there are some tools too, as we've kind of talked about that financial education. Lots of consumers talking about a service called You Need a Budget. So not necessarily a brand, but it's just a tool that consumers are using to help them think about how to better plan, better budget. All of us can take a look at and see how we can leverage a bit of that education to help consumers be better prepared for the worst and mitigate the worst as well. So yeah, we're seeing quite a bit on Costco, the banks, as well as that particular service on helping consumers establish a budget, both long-term and short-term.
Makes sense. This next one is specific to the community. So they ask, are there any interesting differences or nuances in the findings among certain demographics? Great question. Yes, a couple. The need versus want mentality and that approach I talked about mostly is vast and wide. It's pretty much across the board. However, when we look at some of those specific attributes or things that they're looking to prioritize when buying things, we did see that younger consumers are more likely to purchase something that benefits their mental health. So really targeting those millennials and those Gen Zs, when it comes to mental health benefits. And then higher income households were more likely to prioritize quality compared to just the total group. So definitely some interesting kind of nuances there, but broadly we're seeing this kind of need versus want evaluation across the board, no matter the demographic. And that was the only questions we had. We're happy to take questions offline though. You have our emails. You can definitely email us questions. And I believe Megan will share out the recording and the PowerPoint as well. So that was all we had today.
That's right. Thank you guys so much for your timely presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As Caitlin mentioned, if we didn't get to your question, then we can do so by email. And you will also receive an email with a direct link to today's recorded presentation. Additionally, you can reference the handouts section in your event console for more about the research we shared today. And of course, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you, so please feel free to reach out to us. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.